Welcome to another special episode of Fourth and Frames. I'm Chris Battistel, joined by my co-hosts Drew Scott and Rhett Manuel. And tonight we welcome one of our very own to the show, Nate Markham from the Shoot the Gap IDP show. We will be continuing our divisional previews, talking about the AFC West, giving you a must, bust, and a maybe from each team in the division. Let's get it popping. To the show, please like the stream, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell to get notified whenever the Fantasy and Frames team drops new content. We got a bunch of profile videos every day dropping on the channel. We got shorts, we got shows, everything you need to succeed in your fantasy football season. Follow us on Twitter at Fantasy and Frames across every social media platform. Visit www.fantasyandframes.com, where you will find all of our written work, videos, rankings, everything you need when you are going into your drafts, into the season, during the season. We got it all there at www.fantasyandframes.com. Now, let me bring in Fantasy in Frames Director of IDP, host of the Shoot the Gap IDP show, top 5 ranker of IDP, lover of the St. Louis Cardinals, shown by his St. Louis tattoo. When he is not talking fantasy football, you can find him on the Reliever Recon Patreon, talking fantasy baseball. All around good guy and someone I can't wait to meet at the Fantasy Football Expo, Mr. Nate Markham.
You work on the intro a little bit. That was kind of weak, but whatever. I've only done this I'm fucking kidding. That was fantastic. I am ecstatic. I mean, Rhett, you're gonna be the next on that. I have to get together. I had the luck, the opportunity to hang out with Drew last weekend or whenever that was. Feels like just yesterday, but it was long enough ago. And I'll get you here in a couple weeks, and then yes, Rhett, we will follow that up with again. So I do look forward to getting a hang and chop it up with you a little bit, man.
Yep. Now I gotta ask, what is your go-to order at Crazy Sushi?
Oh, Crazy Sushi. Damn, that's a good one. It is. So let's see. My order, or do I have to order for because I'm ordering for my family, right? I got to get Carrie's order in too, because let's be honest, I can't go to sushi by myself or I'll be getting in trouble. She is a pretty basic, but you know what? We go there and we like to eat it, and she calls it edamame or edamame. So she says it wrong and I correct her, and I think she knows now, but it's the edamame. And I'll get 2 large things of sake. Hot or cold for you guys? Yes. First of all, sake, yes or no? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Sake bombs, baby. How many are we doing on the weekend?
As many as you can. But so hot sake. Why? Don't know. Just part of it.
And part of the experience.
Warm, right? It's so much, man. She'll just drink her Diet Coke, and I'll cheers her every time, and it's our thing. But she'll get a what they call a Vegas roll, and I'll get like a spider roll, and nice. Every now and then I switch it up and I try to get something different. I don't know if you guys are sushi people at all or not, but they have that, like the sashimi, which is just the actual, like the fish and or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'll try something different every time. And they have a fatty tuna, which is fantastic. And then they have, the traditional salmon and shrimp. I've even done what the hell is it called? It's the sea urchin. And it is, it's wicked. It's crazy. It's weird. I'm not sure if I like it, but I want to keep getting it because it's like, it's like forbidden. It's so gross looking, and it has a weird, bad texture. And it's not consistent every time. Sometimes it's briny and salty, and other times it's not. Weird. But that's our go-to orders, those things right there, and the experience. And if next time you guys are in St. Louis, when that happens, we will go to Crazy Sushi. Yes, and how the hell do you know Crazy Sushi?
Ha! Nate. I know my stuff, Nate. And I got to say, though, out of the 3 of us, he's probably the smartest guy in the room considering he got married on February 29th, the leap year. So he's only got to celebrate that once every 4 years.
What a pull.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Or I'm the dumbest person in the room because I know my wife's going to make me celebrate on February 28th and March 1st, double the gifts.
Yeah.
She ain't no dummy. She thought she'd let me play along. She's like,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Nope. But it does make it was right before the world shut down too, man. It was crazy. It was
What a
lucky.
time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. And I drafted baseball on my honeymoon. So she even let me do that.
Oh, nice. It's a good woman you got there, Nate.
Yeah, let's check your Google history real quick because I'm freaked out by how good your research is getting. Let's just we're done there.
Kidding. That is that's top notch. Hell, I'm glad to hear that because I had to make a little note. Anniversary 229. Don't forget.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the show, Nate, joining us. You are the resident AFC West expert. As you could tell by your hat, your cardboard cutouts in the back, with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce there of the Kansas City Chiefs. So we're pretty excited to talk AFC West football. And I mean, training camp is here. Fantasy football in general is right around the corner. My guy Jimmy G signed back with the New Orleans Saints. I know Rhett is pretty excited about that one.
Listen, I loved what he gave us in the past. I'm just going to say at this point, we must be given legacy contracts at this point. I'm ready for Scott Shanley. I'm ready for the Jabari Greer. I'm ready for the Jason David. Let's bring them all back. Let's get the band back together, baby. I love it.
It's like the touring Rolling Stones right now with the New Orleans Saints. I love it. Just play the hits, baby. Just play the hits. Anyone watching on Twitter, head over to YouTube. We cannot see your comments on Twitter, so make sure you head over to YouTube. Drop a comment in the section. We will answer all your fantasy football or unfantasy football related questions. And Nate, we can't let you off the hook considering you are a guest tonight. Mm-hmm. Something we do with all of our guests is we ask them to belt out a tune for us. So any chance we can get Nate singing a song?
Yeah. So we just had a chance to go see Snoop this past weekend. We saw Eric Church on Saturday and Snoop on Sunday, and Snoop did a little ditty, taking it back to one of my favorite. And I don't have to sing this way because all I have to do is I won't call it rapping, but I'll start and let you guys go along. And it's cruising down the street in my 6'4", jocking the freaks because it's a clean version, clocking the dough. Went to the park to get the scoop. Knuckleheads out there, cold shooting some hoops, and we need it. A car pulls up. Who can it be? A fresh El Camino rolling Kilo G. He rolls down his window and he started to say, "It's all about making that FRAMES frames."
Yes.
I had that last part, by the way. That was
they didn't say that.
Huh? They did not. No.
Oh, I could have sworn that's how it went.
For a second there, I thought the actual Snoop Dogg was in our presence. And
I can't believe I actually did the stupid radio edit. It pisses me off every time I hear it, and I had to make sure just in case I didn't say any. You never know. You start rapping, I ain't saying the bad words, no matter what they are. No. You always be careful.
Yeah. We had Joe Dolan on last week, and he was rapping Tupac. Followed you, you following him now with Snoop Dogg.
That's Easy-E, actually, technically.
Yeah, technically, yes, correct. You're right. But thank you for that. Thank you. We appreciate you joining the bit and dropping a couple bars for us. Now let's get into the AFC West, a division that has the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers, who just threw the bag at their quarterback, Justin Herbert. We got the Denver Broncos, who have new head coach Sean Payton there, and the Las Vegas Raiders, who have Jimmy G starting under center. So let's dive into the Super Bowl champions, the top of the list in the division, the cream of the crop of the NFL right now. We're going to give you a must, bust, and maybe from the Kansas City Chiefs for you to draft or not draft or maybe draft in your upcoming redraft draft. So let's get to it, Nate. You're the first on the board. Pretty easy choice here. I'm going to go with mostly anybody across the Kansas City Chiefs is pretty much draftable, but give us your must draft for the Kansas City Chiefs.
You know, it's funny you say that anybody on the team is must draftable, but they're probably I've never seen a team that leads the league in basically every offensive category, but yet there's only 2 people drafted in the first 6-7 rounds of a fantasy draft, and Travis Kelce's the only. Like, I wanted to say I had a ton of options, but I love Mahomes and I would love to take a quarterback early, but that's not part of my forte or my MO. But Travis Kelce is, and I get it. He's going early, and people don't necessarily want to take a tight end early. But here's some of the statistics that just are incredible from a guy who we already expect the world out of. 8th in total yardage amongst all pass catchers. Obviously not just tight ends. We know that. He was 2nd in touchdowns. He had a top 20 catch rate. This is, again, amongst all pass catchers. You know what first in catch rate was last year with at least 50 targets? New Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Richie James. Not that has any bearing on anything, but a little tad bit, little nugget to throw out there just in case, right? Mahomes loves good pass catching receivers, good hands. He was 10th in routes run, 6th in targets, 23rd in target percent. So the target percentage could actually rise. There's a chance that you could see a higher target percentage going Kelce's way. It's not outside the realm of possibilities. 1st in yards after contact, and he was 2nd in missed tackles forced. If you take every wide receiver that finished at or better than him in each one of those categories that I just rattled off, you have a list of 3. You have Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, and Travis Kelce. So to say Travis Kelce doesn't deserve necessarily, not you personally saying that, but others, to be in that first round, imagine drafting if you just took the tight end moniker away and say, hey, I'm comfortable drafting Justin Jefferson, maybe Devontae Adams towards the end of the first, maybe second. Jamar Chase didn't have enough games played to fall in line, or he would have. But I think that those statistics, as long as there's no drop off, and that's what we're waiting for, right? The age cliff and that to fall off. But there's reasons for optimism that maybe we could see more. Touchdown is wonky, but I wouldn't be shocked to see a replication, if not an improvement, even from last year.
Yeah, I dig it. I mean, the biggest drop off in his game is being turned down by Taylor Swift. But I don't see any slowing down for Travis Kelce at all. You got Mecole Hardman's gone, Juju's gone. Not that those guys were specifically taking targets away from Travis Kelce. I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster was the leading wide receiver on that team if you take out Travis Kelce off of Kansas City last year. But I don't see any reason. I don't see any signs. I don't see anything that's going to stop Travis Kelce. You've seen teams try to take him out of the game, and the guy just goes off for 25 yards and 4 touchdowns in one game. When they try to do that, he's the ultimate red zone threat. His rapport with Patrick Mahomes is second to none, and I'm excited for him going into the season. Now, in a 1 QB, half PPR, no tight end premium league, what's the earliest that you would consider taking Travis Kelce?
I made this impeccable case about how I'd put him ahead of some of those receivers, and I still think the earliest would probably be at the end of the first round. As I have a spot so I'm not taking him over CMC or Jefferson or Chase. Chubb for me, Eckler, Cooper Kupp. At that point, that's when it starts getting interesting. It's like, okay, maybe Tyreek, which makes a compelling argument, and Kelce, obviously, ex-teammates. I think that's about the spot. So probably around 8-9 is where I would feel okay and going that direction.
Yeah, he's such a positional advantage when it comes to tight ends. It's pretty much Travis Kelce and everybody else. So Travis Kelce, your must draft target for the Kansas City Chiefs. My number one pick, Gary Markham. Welcome to the show. My number one pick in both leagues. I'm guessing that's Scott Fishbowl League she's talking about, Nate.
It is. And then the Battle of the Sexes League that she's in with
right
Andy Behrens and Bob Harris and a few others. And
nice.
me. But yeah, and I did not get Kelce. But yeah, Carrie, if you're listening, Chris called out the crazy sushi order if you weren't listening. So if you can call that in and have that for us tomorrow, that would be great. Hot sake, 2 of them, please.
Sushi now.
Yeah, we just got done eating too. Damn.
Right on. All right, Drew, give us the bust candidate for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, so real quick, before I get to that, my boy Zach, he's in the YouTube comments tonight. He said, boo the Chiefs. So he is, just full disclosure, he is a Chargers fan. So Zach, just stay with us, man. We're going to be talking about the Chargers here in just a minute. But, so that's why he's booing the Chiefs in the comments. So as far as the bust for Kansas City, for me, it's Kadarius Toney. Right now, he's the wide receiver 36, according to the full PPR ADP on Fantasy Pros. I've got him down right around wide receiver 50. I'm sure that ADP is probably going to drop with the news that he's had yet another cleanup surgery, which I think that marks like his second knee operation this offseason already. So even though reports state that there's a chance he's ready for week 1, I would imagine his ADP ends up dropping. But that news is so recent, I don't have enough data to know how far that's going to drop. So right now, he's still my bust. And I've never been one to try to predict or project injuries going into a season. I don't like labeling players as injury prone, but man, if there was ever a counter argument to my stance on that, this guy's probably it. But injuries aside, I'm still plenty concerned with Toney as a fantasy player. Matt Harmon's reception perception has him graded out with a 27% or less success rate versus man, zone, and press last year. So his poor route running ability and to go along with his physical attributes has kind of led him to be more of a gadget player. He's only had 5+ targets in just over 30% of his games. So I can't rationalize spending up for Toney at wide receiver 36 whenever I can just take shots on guys like Sky Moore at wide receiver 56 or Rashee Rice at wide receiver 66, who are the 2 Chiefs receivers that I prefer to take a shot on that I can get much later. So for that, I'm out on Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, agreed. And if you're following any of the training camp news coming out of KC, all you're seeing reports on is Sky Moore, Richie James, Rashee Rice, Sky Moore, Richie James, Rashee Rice. So
Justin Ross, he's been
Justin Ross as well. John Ross retired today, actually, from the Kansas City Chiefs. He is no longer in the NFL. The speedster is no longer in the NFL. But yeah, Justin Ross, what great comeback story there for him, for the Kansas. Rashee Rice. Richie James, Nate mentioned Richie James. Richie James has been getting a lot of love from Kansas City beat writers, and of course, Sky Moore. All right, so we got the must of Travis Kelce, the bust of Kadarius Toney. Rhett, give us the maybe for the Kansas City Chiefs heading into the 2023 fantasy football season.
Hard maybe on Isaiah Pacheco, man. I mean, this is one of those guys where, first off, we all love watching this guy play football. Let's just get that out of the way first and foremost. He runs like his hair's on fire. He's fast. He's strong. He hits the hole. He does all these things that if you're just watching as a football fan, you love watching this guy play football. So this isn't even an indictment on who I think he is as a player, because I think he's a really good player. What this is an indictment of is more or less his role in this offense, because last year you look at him, he comes out 170 attempts, 830 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4.9 yards per carry. Sounds great. However, sharing the backfield with Jerick McKinnon, there were only 13 catches for 130 yards. Now, 10 yards per reception, something happens. Yeah, 10 yards per reception for a running back is elite, but with so few targets, you don't know how that extrapolates out. There are injury concerns with him coming into camp. You know, is he on the pup? Isn't he on the pup? Will he be ready for week 1? He says he is. He probably will be, but you hear those reports, and you have to kind of wonder what's going to happen with that. But his biggest question, like I previously mentioned, is usage. Because if you look at 2022, despite the fact that he had these 170 carries, there was only a 32% snap share for Isaiah Pacheco. He shared that backfield quite significantly with Jerick McKinnon, who had that passing game work, which, as we know, in fantasy football, especially in a half or full PPR format, you are going to end up wanting to gravitate towards those guys who catch the ball because they just offer more yards, more point value, more everything in terms of what you're doing. And looking at the metrics, and I don't have them laid out in front of me, but I didn't see anything in terms of efficiency or anything like that that indicated an elite running back other than the fact that he's 220 pounds and runs this 4.3, an elite athletic profile. So that certainly does help him. And he is only going at around round 7 for the ADP, so you're not taking a huge risk. But like we said, with McKinnon, who had a bigger snap share last year, participating in 44.7% of those snaps, you assume heading into this year, unless something changes, that McKinnon is going to assume that pass work once again. And of course, you have everybody's favorite buzz, CEH, sitting in the background waiting just in case something happens. Shout out LSU, by the way. That's my people. But anyway. So what we're looking at with Pacheco without the receiving upside, and can he catch more passes this year? Sure. But without the receiving upside, to me, he's just another low-end running back too. If he gets goal line work and gets more touchdowns, maybe that goes up. If he gets more pass work, maybe that goes up. But if you're looking at guys who are around him in the Fantasy Pros ADP, Rashad White, I'd rather take him right now because of the pass game work. Alvin Kamara, we don't think he's going to get suspended, and we know the pass game work is always going to be there with him. James Conner, Arizona is going to be terrible, but even when they were terrible last year, James Conner got a ton of work in those last 6 games. Javonte Williams, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about him later, so that is certainly a wait-and-see situation. But all of those guys, with the exception of maybe Javonte, seem a little bit safer to me in 2023 than Isaiah Pacheco does. So this isn't me saying I wouldn't draft Pacheco because I did get him in Scott Fishbowl, and I am getting him at value. But I'll take anybody at value at this point. So, but in terms of guys, you're just saying a big, giant question mark. If this happens, it's Pacheco, man.
Yeah. Another guy that's been a hot topic in that backfield is rookie running back Generic Prince for the Kansas City Chiefs. Been reported that he's been catching everything thrown his way. So that 3-headed monster that they're going to be running there in Kansas City could limit the workload for Isaiah Pacheco. Now, Rhett, Isaiah Pacheco or Dameon Pierce?
Oof. God, that's a tough one. You just hit me with a tough one right there. I would say similar guys, similar workloads. I would say probably more of a snap share on Dameon Pierce. So give me Pierce, but not by much.
All right. I love it. That's the Kansas City Chiefs. Our must is Travis Kelce. Our bust is Kadarius Toney. And our maybe is Isaiah Pacheco. Before we move on to the Los Angeles Chargers, because of the situation in the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver room and not knowing who is going to be the breakout, let's go around the frames here. You don't have to give me any analysis on it. Just give me the name. We'll start with Rhett. We'll go Nate and then Drew. Give me the one name fantasy football wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs that you are drafting. Go ahead, Rhett. Nate?
Sky Moore, yeah.
Yep.
I have the most shares of Justin Ross, so I have been drafting him heavy. So that's, that's who I'm most invested in.
Good old JR. Drew?
I'm also Sky Moore.
Sky Moore, yeah. Sky Moore for me as well. With Juju out of there, with Mecole Hardman out of there. I'm a big Justin Ross guy, but I think Sky Moore is in for a big season. Now, what is a big season for a Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver? Is that a wide receiver 3 in fantasy, back end wide receiver 2? As you mentioned at the top, Travis Kelce is going to be the guy to own as a pass catcher for that team. So you're not reaching for one of these guys, but if you're going to get one of these guys, I believe, as well as Rhett and Drew, it's Sky Moore. But Justin Ross, man, could be that sleeper for you that you're either getting off of waivers come week 1, or you're drafting at the back end of your drafts when you're looking to take a shot. Now let's get into a divisional rival for the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers. formerly the San Diego Chargers. They just threw the bag at Justin Herbert. I wonder about the awkwardness in that locker room when Justin Herbert sees Austin Eckler, knowing the situation of the running back pay in the NFL and looking at the contract that Justin Herbert just got. But the Los Angeles Chargers locked up their star quarterback, their QB1 for the future. Big money going to Justin Herbert. But Drew, give me the must draft for the Los Angeles Chargers heading into the 2023 season.
Yeah, man, it's still Keenan Allen. It's always Keenan Allen. I promise that this pick isn't being boosted by that one-handed grab he made in camp today, although that was a beautiful clip. If you haven't seen it yet, you should go check it out. This is much more due to the fact that from week 11 to week 18 last year, he was the wide receiver 3 in PPR, averaging just under 19 points a game. So, I mean, this dude, whenever he's on the field, he is still really, really good. And not only is he really, really good, but he's also attached to a really good quarterback that, as you mentioned, just got the bag. And on top of that, I think their offense got an upgrade at OC this offseason, too, with the addition of Kellen Moore. So I think all of this is working in Keenan Allen's favor. Now, something that might not be working in his favor is the fact that they invested a first-round pick in Quentin Johnston. They added to that wide receiver room that could cut down into that 20+% target share that he's hit the last 3 years. But with how much the Chargers throw the ball, just in terms of pure volume, and then with my expectation of Keenan Allen continuing to be Herbert's safety blanket, I don't think that QJ ad is going to affect Herbert or affect Keenan Allen too much. Not to mention the fact that Herbert has been comfortable targeting Keenan in the red zone as well. So if we assume that Keenan Allen's playing 15+ games, he's going to get you those 6 to 8 touchdowns that he's good for every year. It's like clockwork. Go look at his season logs. It's wild. So right now he's the wide receiver 18 off the board according to Fantasy Pros. I've got him as wide receiver 14. So I'm in on Keenan Allen. That's the piece of this passing offense that I want.
Yeah, Keenan Allen's the go-to guy over the past 2 seasons, 227 targets, 148 receptions there, over 1,700 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. So big time for the Los Angeles Chargers is Keenan Allen. I'm not too sure how much Quentin Johnson is going to factor into that usage for him, but if he can stay healthy, because he has missed a few games over the past 4 seasons. In 2016, he only played that 1 game. In 2015, he had 8 games. In 2014, 14 games. And then 2013, only 15 games. So durability, as he's getting older, it could be a bit of an issue for Keenan Allen, as we've seen. But before that, he was pretty steady with games played. So I dig Keenan Allen as the must grab. And you're getting him at a good value, especially in redrafts, like you said there, compared to the people going around him. So Keenan Allen is the must draft for the Los Angeles Chargers. Rhett, give us the bust, and please don't break my heart.
Well, if breaking your heart means we're going to talk about Mike Williams, then let's talk about Mike Williams.
So we're good.
All right. So first off, let's talk about where Mike Williams is currently going according to consensus at Fantasy Pros. Currently around a 6th-round ADP, wide receiver 26. All right. So you're saying high in wide receiver 3. I have him as my wide receiver 34. So well below where Fantasy Pros is, and more like a low end wide receiver 3. And here is why. Before I give you this answer, let's go ahead and ask the question. Chris, gun to your head, if you had to ask the question right now, how many 100 target seasons has Mike Williams had in his 6-year career?
Ooh, shoot me, man. I don't know.
1.
Yeah, I was going to guess 1.
He has had greater than 100 targets in exactly 1 season of his career. Now, he's had 2 1,000-yard seasons in those 6, but one of those was in that big season where he had greater than 100 targets. Currently, I have him as my number 80 overall player. And let's just be honest, he's tantalizing as a player. He's big, he's fast, he can jump up and get the ball. He does everything you want him to, but his role has always been as a deep ball guy who has traditionally been an outside clasher. And Drew mentions new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. I got to keep the trend going. And let's just ask the question. Michael Gallup has traditionally been used to kind of clear things out in Dallas. Is Big Mike going to be his new Michael Gallup? We don't know that yet. And I mean, it's possible that he is, because he has this ability to get up and clear things out and be this guy who is a pretty good deep threat. Now, last year, Mike Williams outperformed his expected fantasy points per game by about 2 points per game, which tells us, hey, he overperformed. Is there a regression coming? Like we said, he is a great contested catch guy, but in the past few seasons, Los Angeles' targets have been consolidated around Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. And like we said, we add in QJ, and we don't really know what's going to happen. Is it going to hurt Keenan Allen? Probably not. Is it going to hurt Mike Williams? Almost definitely. So being a third option in an offense like this is never ideal. And like we say, he's always got this potential. He's always a guy that you're like, man, that guy looks the part 100%. But I'm avoiding him due to the uncertainty of what he's been in the past and what he may be this season.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely an interesting situation there for the Los Angeles Chargers and what they do with that passing game with Kellen Moore there, what wide receiver they're going to lean on. Nate, do you own a lot of Mike Williams on your fantasy football teams?
I won't say a lot. He's always, whenever if I go safe with my wide receivers early, he's my prototypical.
I think he was going to say he's prototypical wide receiver 3, which is, I couldn't agree more. It's exactly the strategy that I take with Mike Williams. If I've got at least one safe option, maybe 2, if I went wide receiver early, I'm all about going after Mike Williams. I've got him as wide receiver 31 right now, so I'm not too far off from what Rhett's talking about. It just makes me sad to talk about it because I've always been a Mike Williams guy. So it doesn't feel good to talk about it, but I think the best case scenario for Mike Williams is obviously, number 1, he stays healthy. And then number 2, the Kellen Moore being willing to play fast and hopefully let Justin Herbert throw the ball downfield as opposed to just asking him to dump it off 30 times a game could lead to Mike Williams being more productive. I think that Kellen Moore might possibly play into his strengths a little bit more than their offensive coordinator did last year, but he has to stay on the field for any of that to matter. It's definitely a risk reward type of pick.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation where because he's that big jump ball guy, he's that go up and get it wide receiver. It tends, because in his big body, when he hits the floor, man, he hits it hard. In 2021, in 2021, before that knee injury there, he was a top 15 wide receiver in a lot of these advanced metrics. So when he comes down, he hits hard, and that takes him a lot out of the game. I remember watching the one game, he went up for a big jump ball, landed on his hip, and he wasn't the same the rest of the season since that injury. So you gotta, unlike a Keenan Allen who's gonna just juke you out of your underwear, Mike Williams is not that type of wide receiver. So Keenan Allen's not that big go up and get it every time, like down the sideline, outside of the numbers wide receiver. And so his health is more, I guess, just tread on the tires, where Mike Williams is just that, go up, bully wide receiver, is going to moss you if he's got the chance. Zach Whitaker, whatever you do. Oh, I lost it there. But Zach Whitaker, thanks for joining the show, Zach. Whatever you do, just get Mike before a game against Kansas City. Absolutely racks up the stats against them every single time.
He does seem to have
not
some
wrong,
games
Zach,
against Kansas City.
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing for me for Mike Williams. I think Nate's sushi order was in, so he faked a free so he could go get some grub on, and I don't blame him there. But I dig it. Mike Williams is the bus candidate for us here on the Fourth and Frames fantasy football show. Nate, welcome back.
How was the sushi, man?
Yep, that was decent.
You get a couple rolls in you?
I can jump back in. Talking about the Chargers makes me nauseous, so I really have an appetite when I think about them. But actually, if Justin Herbert had one good meal to have, what would he have? Ribs. So let's continue on. Let's go with that's a hot shot at the old Chiefs busting them. So did you want to, as far as the maybe with the Chargers?
Yeah, give us the maybe.
Johnson, I think, is the maybe, simply because everything we've talked about, Kellen Moore, Kellen Moore coming there. The offense is already pretty established and dominant, and the pace can even be improved. The one other area for me, at least, is this little factoid or question, I guess. I'll ask it. Who led the Chargers wide receiver room last year in snaps? Do we know?
Josh Palmer.
Gotcha. Who was second?
Was that right?
That is correct. Josh Palmer is number 1.
Oh, wow.
And number 2 would be, see, the fact that you're just not immediately spitting out Mike Williams or Keenan Allen.
Is it Jalen Guyton or something crazy like that?
It's DeAndre Carter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There you go.
Now, to think that a person like Quentin Johnson, given historical, and I'm not saying they're injury prone, I'm not going to use those terms, but it is what it is. And if there's a situation for a person to come in and actually have a significant role, it's a 6'3", 215-pound first-round investment in Quentin Johnson. And we've seen that. The Chargers, with, their profile, they're capable of supporting 3 receivers. Is that question, though, is that going to be, if the 2 are healthy, is that Josh Palmer? Because he still has to beat him out for that role. And I think he will. But I think it's a little opportunistic to think he's going to jump right into that 3rd wide receiver spot. But I am drafting Quentin Johnson in a lot of places. I'm comfortable with where he's going. And I'm investing not on the heels of Mike Williams being bust or that Keenan Allen being hurt or a combination of both, but because I think an offense can support it. And I mean, hell, if I have to look around where Quentin Johnson's going, there's not a ton of names that I'm hyper enamored for. And maybe Jameson Williams. No, I mean, there's one, and it's Nico Collins. So let's not,
let's go Nico, baby.
Yeah,
right.
Fight the feeling.
Yeah, Quentin Johnson was a stud who tend to disappear a bit in those TCU games at the college level. Coming up to the Los Angeles Chargers, he's going to have an elite thrower in Justin Herbert. They're going to be playing behind a great offensive line. They got a great running back there. He's got other weapons that the Chargers are going to have to rely on outside of Quentin Johnson, so he's not going to be that focal point in that offense. For me, Quentin Johnson's a guy that's going to come on the second half late in the season. So if you're a fantasy other members in your fantasy leagues tend to reach up, draft Quentin Johnson. He starts off slow. They drop him. Don't be afraid to stash him on your team, claim him off waivers, stash him on your teams for late in the season for when he might finally come on. Because as we've seen Keenan Allen, we've seen Mike Williams go off early in the season, and then they kind of maybe tail off either with injuries or something else. Quentin Johnson can be that guy for the Los Angeles Chargers, especially in the red zone, in the end zone. He's that big body, go up and catch it wide receiver, kind of like Mike Williams is, just maybe a little bit more reliable. So our must draft for the Los Angeles Chargers is Keenan Allen, given to you by Drew. Our bust is Mike Williams with a bullet, right, Rhett? And then our maybe is Quentin Johnson from the Los Angeles Chargers. When you're looking at the Chargers team, Drew, is there any sleeper that you could see coming out of the squad?
I mean, I think if you look at the tight end room, Gerald Everett could be interesting just as a late round dart throw. If you punt the tight end position, they throw the ball enough. He's a really athletic dude. I think you could do worse in terms of late round dart throws. So I think the receiver room's pretty clear at running back. We didn't talk about Eckler tonight, but I think he's our consensus running back 2 on fantasyandframes.com on our rankings. So we're not really doubting or questioning Austin Eckler. So I think looking at the tight end room, Gerald Everett could be interesting as like a tight end streamer.
Yeah, agreed. Another tight end in that room is Donald Parham, who's been getting a lot of traction for the Los Angeles Chargers. Another guy who could be a streamer for you. Rhett, do you have a sleeper coming out of the Los Angeles Chargers offense?
I mean, I was kind of with him as Gerald Everett being the one guy you can kind of say would be a sleeper more than anybody else. I mean, we know who Eckler is. We know who Keenan is. Yeah. We're not interested in Josh Palmer. We don't think any of those backup running backs are going to be that much of a threat. So by default, it almost has to be Gerald Everett. I agree with Drew on that.
Yep. And who do you guys see as the handcuff to draft behind Austin Eckler? Is it maybe Isaiah Spiller? Is it Joshua Kelly there? Or is it just I'm not touching it? I'm going to let my league mates handle that situation. Because if Austin Eckler goes down, none of those guys are Austin Eckler, no matter how good the profile is.
Yeah, if I had to pick one, I guess I would go Josh Kelly. But Eckler's one of those guys to where if he goes down, I'm not racing to the waivers to try to pick up his handcuff because I think it'll be a split job between multiple guys. Like they're not going to give anybody the work that they give Eckler. And they've been trying to find like a serviceable running back too, or a handcuff to Eckler for the last couple of years in the draft, and every running back that they draft just hasn't worked out. And so I just can't really see. It's not that that's not a room. If Eckler is something, God forbid, something happens to Eckler, I'm just avoiding the running back position on the Chargers.
Yeah, let someone else deal with it, right?
Do you think their contract with Herbert has, and I didn't look into it enough, does it clear up any space where they may be a contender for one of the free agent running backs out there that to add to that room? I mean, is that something that I have never heard anybody even link to that team? Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't be like the end of the world, the most shocking thing I've ever heard if they add some stability and depth to that running back room. But I don't know how their contract situation is or their salary cap, so I don't want to speculate on something that this is where we need Tyler, who probably has it in front of him. He's reading it right now.
That's a good thought, though. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know, but I mean, it could be like an interesting spot for like Kareem Hunt or something like that.
Maybe even Zeke Elliott teaming up with Kellen Moore from the Dallas Cowboys there, try to spell some of that goal line offense, kind of snake some of those touchdowns away from Austin Eckler. So that's the Los Angeles Chargers. Let's dive in to the Denver Broncos. It is restoration season in Colorado with Sean Payton now the head coach for the Denver Bronco program. We're going to give you a must, bust, and maybe from the Denver Broncos, starting off with Rhett. Rhett, give us the must draft for the Denver Broncos, brother.
Broncos country, let's ride for Jerry Jeudy. See, we call that a little fugaboo right there, a little fake. But look, my man Jerry Jeudy right now is currently firing up these draft boards. There's a lot of hype going on with him. Currently, if you look at Fantasy Pros, he is player 49 overall, which I mean puts him in the beginning of round 5, which is honestly higher than we thought. Currently around wide receiver 25 as well. And he was efficient last year with his 972 receiving yards. But the reason that I love him in this situation is because Sean Payton loves these types of wide receivers. You know, these guys who can get to their spots, who can run their routes, who catch the ball, who do everything well. We saw it with Marcus Colson, who wasn't the most athletic guy in the world, but had multiple 1,000-yard seasons just doing little things well. Lance Moore was an effective slot pretty much only in New Orleans, doing the little things well. So I can only imagine, knowing Sean Payton like I do from watching his teams for 15 years, that he has already fallen in love with Jerry Jeudy as a player. If you look at his Fantasy Pros projections for Jerry Jeudy this year, you're looking at 73 receptions, 1,038 yards and 6 touchdowns, which is a pretty solid season. Now, do I think why would I be racing to go for that guy? Why do I say he's a must draft? Because I think he's in a position where he can outperform that projection. You know, it's hard to tell because they may spread the ball around, but it is a very good possibility because, like we said, let's go back to the coach. Sean Payton loves himself some balance. And he loves consolidating those targets around a few guys. You know, my man Chris is wearing the Jimmy Graham jersey. There were years where Jimmy Graham pretty much ran that offense. Sean Payton is going to try to find himself a guy to feed that ball to be the primary receiver and then sprinkling it around everywhere else. Like we say, currently, wide receiver 25, Jerry Jeudy being the best all-around player in that receiver room. We like Courtland Sutton. We like where he's being drafted. The upside is certainly there. We're kind of, can we all agree we're out on Tim Patrick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Tim Patrick is a zero for us.
Of course, Drew's not.
One of my leagues has a great nickname for Tim Patrick that I can't get into, but I believe it has some MF things somewhere in there. But anyway, all things said, you know, wide receiver 25 according to Fantasy Pros, I think That's a little bit low as to where he's going to be later on once draft season rolls around. Sure. But for now, get him while you can and get him where you can right now. If you're drafting right now, or if you are in a league, in a dynasty league, I know we're talking redraft, but if you can get Jerry Jeudy in a dynasty league, now is probably the time where you can get him at the lowest, because in a little while, I think there's going to be some real hype around him personally.
Yeah. I'm a big Jerry Jeudy guy. Breaking down into his season last year, he averaged 6 yards after the catch, which was fifth amongst players with at least 100 targets. So that big play ability is there for him, as well as some of his consistency. He was one of 19 receivers to finish in the top 24 in at least 8 weeks last season. So not only is he consistent, not only does he have that big play ability, he's getting the offensive-minded coach of Sean Payton to run that system for him. Sean Payton's been boasting a lot of love for Jerry Jeudy. He is going to be the wide receiver 1 for the Denver Broncos. But again, just like Kansas City Chiefs, what is the wide receiver 1 for Denver going to ultimately be for fantasy managers? That sweet spot. Do you see him as a top end, finishing as a top end wide receiver 2, Rhett, or do you see him as a mid to low end wide receiver 2 come season's end?
I think a mid-tier wide receiver 2 is probably a safe bet for him. Anything above that, he's punching well above his weight, and he's had an outstanding season. If he gets into a wide receiver 1 situation, I mean, look out, because something has gone incredibly right for the Denver Broncos offense. Yep,
I agree. So Jerry Jeudy is our must-draft player from the Denver Broncos. Nate, welcome back, Clear Nate. Bye-bye, Grainy Nate.
Clear Nate.
Yes.
But give us the bust candidate. This one just hurts me, man. But give us the bust candidate for the Denver Broncos.
The crazy thing is, I think you could have this show with 20 different people and you might get 20 different answers, ranging from Jerry Jeudy to Cortland Sutton to Russ. And you look at some of the statistics to back it up, and everything just went wrong last year. And I think everything has an ability with a new coach and a new system and a better system and a year removed for Russ. The one thing that you can't change out, though, are rebound seasons from injury. And that's what Javonte Williams is hobbling into this season is I know he's not on the pup and he's going to be fine, is what everybody's saying. I hope he is. I don't want him not to recover 100%. I actually like Javonte a lot. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that anything positive, you're checking the boxes, 1 year post ACL tear is already a hurdle to overcome. And I don't think he's going to fall. If you believe he's Adrian Peterson or Jamal Charles, then you can back that up until you get to the second check mark, which is the fact of a multiple ligament injury, which is really even not just twice as bad. It's honestly even more layered than that. There's not a ton of history. It's actually such a small sample of anybody that's come back from that and been able to, quote unquote, be healthy by week 1. You're facing an uphill battle in 2 situations. And then you add in Samaje Perine, who has been proven that, look at the playoff game against Kansas City. They relied on Perine to carry a heavy enough workload, and I know that Peyton loves running with multiple backs. And I think that Javonte, even if healthy for week 1, will see more than 60% of the carries this year or workload, I think is probably unrealistic. So even if healthy, I'm down. Now his ADP is baked in to the fact that he's probably not going to be 100% of the workload. We know that. We can see that where he's at. But it just seems like too many situations are standing there where I would rather shoot. The ceiling play for Javonte doesn't exist in my eyes this year. I know it could, and I know people can make a case. The case that everybody would have to make is he's going to rebound from a situation that nobody rebounds from. Year 2, year 3, maybe. Year 1, extremely challenging. There are positives. Let's be honest. If going forward, Russ and this offense and the amount of checkdowns that he had seen, I didn't realize how high up Russ was. He was 5th most checkdowns last year, percentage. Now, granted, different coach, different situation, but I know it breaks your heart, Chris, and maybe you have optimism that I would love to hear, but that has me concerned.
Yeah, it's not much optimism. The optimism is that he didn't end up on the pup to start training camp. But if you watch any of the clips coming out of that Denver Broncos training camp, if you look at any of the pictures, he does have a giant leg brace on that knee. My worry is that the Denver Broncos kind of rush him back into playing, which would ultimately, could ultimately spell another injury with that knee. So, and it was a pretty devastating knee injury that he did suffer there. So I think he was projected to come back of at least a couple months from the week 1 start, right? Like it was still supposed to be a couple months after that. Sean Payton did bring in Samaje Perine. They told Samaje Perine that they were going to give him a decent workload in that offense, and that was part of the reason why Perine signed with the Denver Broncos. So as much as it hurts my heart because I'm a big Javonte Williams guy, I'm also a realist, and I know the situation is kind of bleak for him as a fantasy producer. We talked about it with I forget who it was. I think it was Howard Bender, where we were talking about letting someone else draft Javonte Williams right away and then hitting up that owner mid-season or early season and trying to work out a trade for Javonte Williams because he's one of those guys that could come on to the scene late into the season and ultimately be that league winner for you that everyone's searching for mid-season off the waivers or through trades. So if he starts off slow, maybe you dish off Samaje Perine to that owner, Samaje Perine plus to that owner to get Javonte Williams, stash him on your bench, wait for that breakout to happen, and then he's ultimately going to be, a solid RB2 for your team, a solid flex player for your fantasy teams right there. So again, as much as it hurts to see Javonte Williams beside the word bust, I understand the situation there in Denver. I understand the situation with him and his knee, and it's just not very good. I'm worried that they're just rushing him back too far. He looks great in the drills. Don't get me wrong. Watching him do the running back drills, doing his cuts in and out. His teammates have come out and said that he looks great. He's in a great spot. His recovery's been amazing. I'm just a cautious optimist with Javonte Williams heading into the 2023 fantasy season. Rhett, are you drafting Javonte Williams at all?
No, and here's why. I'm going to have you guys gather around the fire and let's have a little story time. A couple years ago in a dynasty league, I made the mistake of trading for Saquon Barkley the year after his ACL injury. And if freaking Saquon Barkley cannot do it, I don't see it for Javonte Williams. I mean, we know who Saquon is. We know the upside. And even then, I was banking on the upside. Oh, this guy's a freak. He's going to bounce back. Of course he will. He's Saquon. He didn't. And like Nate said, this is more than just a torn ACL. This is a torn ACL plus. Javonte is one of these guys where, yes, we all love the talent. We all saw this guy in his rookie year, and we thought this guy's about to set fantasy football on fire. And he may very well still, but it's hard to see that happening this year.
Yep. There it is. All right, Drew, give us the maybe in this Denver Broncos offense and tell us why it is Tim Patrick.
Yes.
I actually do like Tim Patrick a little bit, but not enough to put him as a maybe. But for me, my maybe, I would go as far as to say that if you miss out on the first couple tiers of tight end, like if Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, T.J. Hockenson, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Dallas Goedert, Jelani Woods, if those guys are off the board, I think that I might almost say that Greg Dulcich is a must draft at that point. Now we know that rookie tight ends, they rarely ever produce, but Dulcich quietly put together quite the rookie season despite the struggles that Denver had last year. He was 9th in yards per catch and had the 5th highest average of receiving yards per game among rookie tight ends over the last 20 years. He finished as a tight end 1 in 60% of the games he played last year, and that was while being second among tight ends in the number of passes deemed uncatchable by, Russ's let Russ cook season that he did not cook whatsoever. So it appears that the fantasy community has settled, and Rhett, myself, I think we're all on the Jerry Jeudy train. He's the number 1 option in this offense, but nobody really seems to want to draft Cortland Sutton or Tim Patrick. So what's stopping Greg Dulcich from being the second option in this offense? And for me, whenever I'm looking at later round tight ends and the guys outside of that top 6 or 7, that's one of the main qualities I'm looking for. I want a guy that has the opportunity to be the second target in his offense, and I think that that's in the range of outcomes for Greg Dulcich. So right now, he's going as a tight end 16, and I've got him right on the edge of as a tight end 1. I've got him as my tight end 12. So give me all the Greg Dulcich this year, especially if you're punting early tight end.
Yeah, it could end up being one of those elite streamers for you if you're streaming those tight ends. Plus, you can't deny the sweet lettuce he has flowing out of that.
He's got a nice flow. Yeah.
Yeah, when he's running
But
downfield.
if I can add to the Dulcich thing for a little bit,
Sure,
Sean Payton every year, Chris, you've watched him for a long time. There's one of these vaunted Sean Payton terms that's get thrown around for the guy who offers the biggest matchup problem in his offense, the quote unquote Joker role. It was Alvin Kamara for a little while there. There might have been some Taysom Hill stuff thrown around there. Don't get me started on that, but it was done. It was a thing that happened. There were reports about a month ago that Sean Payton perhaps saw Greg Dulcich as that Joker guy in his offense. So, he's big, he's fast, he can get to his spots. He offers a lot of issues. You might see him play more slot snaps than we even realize based off of the type of player he is. So, yeah, I'm with Drew. Dulcich is very, very interesting.
Yep, I agree with that. And like Drew said, if you miss out on those top tier tight ends, Greg Dulcich could be the guy that you're going to want on your fantasy rosters. That is the Denver Broncos must, bust, and maybe for the 2023 season. Our must is Jerry Jeudy. Our bust, I don't even want to say it, but it's Javonte Williams. And our maybe is Greg Dulcich. It's tight end for the Denver Broncos. Now let's dive in to probably one of the more, I don't want to use the word intriguing because I don't know if it is really intriguing over there in Las Vegas, but it's definitely mildly interesting considering who they got throwing the ball under center with Jimmy Vegas there, Jimmy Garoppolo. A lot of news reports about his health and him before signing not passing physical and then maybe not being ready for week 1, and the Raiders being able to get out from under his contract if he's not ready for week 1. And then there was talk of Aiden O'Connell probably maybe starting for that team, and who knows what's really going on in Las Vegas. But let's dive into the Las Vegas Raiders must, bust, and maybes for the 2023 fantasy season. Nate, starting with you, who is I guess this is a pretty simple one. We threw you a nice lob down the middle of the plate, but who is the must draft for the Las Vegas Raiders? You're on mute.
So I actually went back and forth on this.
Okay.
Not because I just thought it was too easy to say Davante Adams and the pushback that people have given for, he's the wide receiver 7 right now. And in some circles, in some situations, I've seen people even dropping him down into 8, 9, 10 behind AJ Brown and people like Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra. And I think that we're not giving the man the credit that he is not only deserved, but has earned at this point. Remember what I was saying about Travis Kelce, about all those statistics and how he's one of the 3, Davante Adams being one of those in a situation that, let's be honest, it wasn't great. We know that Derek Carr coming in, the connection, it was a new quarterback. It was going to be a downgrade. He still had this, incredible season, but is the drop-off from Derek Carr to Jimmy G that we think is going to be, is it really going to be that big of a drop-off? Look what Derek Carr did last year. What was he in, true completion percentage? He was 30th. In deep ball completion, 28th. In red zone completion, 27th. Nothing that he did, and that wasn't even just with Derek Carr. It was Jarrett Stidham as well that he had to compete with and still finished as the wide receiver 3 overall. And I think this year what we're going to find is that when you have a receiver like Davante Adams always says, run every route that looks the same. And that's what he does. He's one of the, if arguably, maybe the best route runner. He's what reception perception is essentially like. If you had a model, I'm sure Matt Harmon would agree and say this Davante Adams. He excels in every single area that every quarterback does well. It's like, oh, what does Jimmy G do well? He does hook routes or curl routes or deep bombs or slants. Oh, how does Devontae Adams run those? Oh, 99 percentile, 98th percentile, 95. Everything he runs is fit to that quarterback. So no matter the narrative, it's like, well, he doesn't throw a good deep ball. Well, Devontae Adams doesn't need a good deep ball. Either Derek Carr, and he's still going to make it work. The targets around Devontae Adams shouldn't be too terrible in my mind to take a lot away. And I know that's going to lean a little bit on the chicken or the egg. Does not having a person opposite mean he's going to get double teamed? You don't think he was getting double teamed last year? I mean, come on. He's got to be. And it's the one thing I wanted to look up. I know 2 years ago he was the most targeted or the most heavily double teamed receiver in the league. I would have a hard time believing last year he wasn't up there as well. And going back, anybody in the chat and or listening, please let me know if he was, because I should have done the research there. But if you tell me he was 20th, I'll never come on this show ever again, because that's how confident I am that he's that dominant. And so he's really just, I don't know, I don't want to say undervalued, underrated, because I was feeling the same way. I was ignoring him. I was pushing him down, saying, I don't want that connection with the Jimmy G situation in Vegas. And, if Josh Jacobs holds out and they don't have a running game, can that offense score enough to be relevant? And I still don't know if they'll be relevant, but no, easy Gator. You can't get me in 21st. Can't get rid of me that easy, my friend. I got StreamYard controls still, so I'll jump in whenever and bombard. He's gonna change the locks on me, I'm sure. But yeah, I think that where Devontae Adams is going, I think that we as a collective fantasy community should feel more comfortable about the values that we can get him at the end of the first round, to pair with one of the, again, there's some cases, man. Bijan slips a little bit, Drew. You can have Bijan and Devontae Adams at near the back. Watch out.
Oh, baby. Don't tempt me with a good time.
Yummy.
Yeah, and Devontae Adams is the guy who last season was second in targets per route run against both zone and man coverage, with 28% against zone and 30% against man. He's a successful wide receiver. He's got a quarterback that's going to be able to get him the ball. Jimmy G is one of the more accurate passers in the NFL when it comes to some of those little dump offs, mid-target throws. So, I'm not too worried about the deep balls for Jimmy Garoppolo throwing those downfield. They're going to work the game plan into what Jimmy G's strengths are, and Devontae Adams is going to run the routes that accent what Jimmy G can do on the field, and we've seen it. He is an elite pass catcher. He's being drafted as, like you said, the wide receiver 10, and I think over the last 3 years he is the wide receiver 3 in total points when it comes down to it. So Devontae Adams is a stud, and where you are being able to get him, he is a must draft. So make sure you are picking up Devontae Adams. Now, the bust, I guess you could say the rest of the team, but the bust for the Las Vegas Raiders is going to Rhett. So Rhett, bless us with the bust for the Raiders coming into the season.
First things first, if you're going to talk about Las Vegas and you're making me pick a bust on a team that frankly doesn't have a whole lot of options, because really in terms of fantasy viable options, 100% you're going either Devontae or Josh Jacobs, and I'm not picking Josh Jacobs as a bust simply because he's going to have too much of a role. So I'm just going to go ahead and go with one of these guys that's actually being drafted, and I think being drafted too high, and that's the rookie tight end Michael Mayer. First off, let's just call it what it is. None of us, especially in a redraft format, are comfortable drafting and starting a first-year tight end. There's too much to learn. They have to learn to be a receiver. They have to learn to be a blocker. They have a lot going on at that position, more than most. So that first-year tight end learning curve tends to be much larger than most positions, perhaps maybe even outside of quarterback. You can make that argument. Currently, he has a late ADP. He's going in that Jelani Woods zone, consensus tight end 20 on Fantasy Pros, 172 overall, so a late-round flyer on that. Projected this year, oh baby, are you ready for these stats that he's projected for according to Fantasy Pros?
Ready.
33 catches, 355 yards, 2 touchdowns. So if you're looking for a good time, call up Michael Mayer, and he is certainly ready to supply a dud of a fantasy football evening for you. But anyway, in terms of dynasty, I think he's a pretty strong dynasty play. But that being said, in redraft, he is a no. His role is likely going to be in the blocking game, especially didn't Las Vegas add Austin Hooper and OJ Howard in that tight end room as well?
They did. Yep.
Yeah. Both of these guys tend to be a little bit, look like they could be a little more of a receiving role. I know OJ Howard hasn't quite panned out to what it can be, but we can at least acknowledge that he's a pretty good athlete. While my man, Michael Mayer, not so much. Looking at what Player Profiler does with their athleticism scores, his tight end rank in terms of athleticism at the position this year was 21st out of 22 eligible players. In terms of all time, they had him ranked as the number 460 of 462 tight ends in terms of athleticism. Anybody who has gotten into the analytics of tight ends knows that athleticism is pretty predictive of tight end success in the long run. So he's not a super athlete. So the question becomes, and it won't even be this year because we don't believe in him this year, so don't draft him. But for the long term, let's throw the dynasty people a bone. Is he Zach Ertz or is he Cole Kmet? So is he a touchdown-dependent guy like Kmet, or is he Zach Ertz who might sneak around and get a 1,000-yard season somewhere down the line? We're not really sure. But even so, if he's Cole Kmet didn't break out until year 3. So all this to say that Michael Mayer is certainly much more of a dynasty play, and he's just a guy we should be avoiding this year.
Yep, totally agree with that analysis there, Rhett. Solid as usual. Our must is Devontae Adams. Our bust is Michael Mayer. Drew, hit us with that maybe for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Hey, so this doesn't feel good, to be honest with you, because my approach to the Raiders this year has been to just draft Josh Jacobs and draft Devontae Adams and then just stay as far away from this team as I possibly can, even though I felt kind of attacked because, you know, Nate mentioned all those dumb fantasy analysts that has Devontae Adams down around like the wide receiver 9, wide receiver 10, and I look over at my rankings and lo and behold, Devontae Adams is the wide receiver 9, and now I'm ducking for cover, but I still want to draft him though. I still like him, but if I have to pick a maybe, gun to my head, I'll go with one of my favorite free agent wide receivers from this past offseason, and that was Jacoby Myers. I didn't love the fact that he landed in Las Vegas, but it appears he's in line to be the wide receiver 2 for the Raiders offense, especially if there's any truth to the rumors that Hunter Renfrow could possibly be let go. I don't understand that. I don't know the ins and outs of his contract, but I saw that floating around on the internet. So, you know, if it's on the internet, it has to be true. He's seen a target on at least 22% of his routes for 3 straight years, and he's finished as a top 30 receiver the last 2 years. Right now, he's going off the board as wide receiver 51. So that's pretty well behind the 2 top 30 seasons he's put up the last couple of years. So I still don't love the idea of drafting a Raider not named Josh Jacob or Devontae Adams. But if you're going to make me do it, that guy I'm going to pick, my maybe, my dart throw at the end of drafts, it's Jacoby Myers.
Yeah. All around team guy too, restructured his contract for Las Vegas Raiders.
For him yet.
I dig Jacoby. I'm for Jacoby Myers. There was that one season where you just struggled to catch touchdowns, but last season was pretty decent for him in New England. So I don't hate the Jacoby Myers draft as a late round flyer for you, a guy that's going to fill in comfortably for your bye weeks, or if someone goes down with injury, Jacoby Myers can be a solid flex option for you heading into the 2023 season. That is our AFC West breakdown, our divisional preview for the Kansas City Chiefs. Our must is Travis Kelce. Our bust is Kadarius Toney. No surprise there. And our maybe is Isaiah Pacheco. For the Los Angeles Chargers, our must is Keenan Allen. Our bust is Mike Williams. And our maybe is Quentin Johnson, rookie wide receiver. For the Denver Broncos, we have Jerry Jeudy as our must. Our bust is Javonte Williams. Our maybe is Greg Dulcich. And then for the Las Vegas Raiders, our must is Devontae Adams. Our bust is Michael Mayer, and our maybe is Jacoby Myers. Now, speaking of Las Vegas and playing the odds, we got some numbers here for you guys. I'm going to deliver the fellas the odds, which you should be using. I don't know if you guys do it, but I kind of, I'll go into the sports book. I use those over under numbers as kind of a tool in my toolbox when I'm looking at players that I may or may not want to draft based on what they have set, because it is Vegas. They're in the business of winning money, not losing money. So they kind of really do their homework as to what these players are going to have in their output. So I'm going to give you guys a player. You're just going to, and I'll give you the total yardage that Vegas has. I use Caesar's Sportsbook here. I'll give you the number. I'll give you the player. And then you just let me know, you don't have to dive into it too much, but if you want to, that's appreciated as well. You just let me know whether you're going high or lower on the number that I'm going to give you. And Nate, since you are the guest, we'll start with you. San Francisco wide receiver Brandon Ayuk has been turning a lot of heads in training camp, as well as Drew's guy, Trey Lance. He had a big day today in camp. A lot of positive reports for Trey Lance coming out of camp. But Brandon Ayuk has also been a darling for the San Francisco 49ers. There was a report that came out that he has just been a magnet for the football. Deebo Samuel has shed a few LBs, so he's looking good as well. But Caesar Sportsbook has Brandon Ayuk's receiving yards at 800.5, so 800.5. Are you going higher or lower than that number for Brandon Ayuk?
What'd you say about Vegas? They're pretty smart, right? And they don't like losing money. Why in the world would they have an over-under at 800 when he's exceeded that 2 of the 3 seasons? The one season he didn't, he played 12 total games. So he was on pace to shatter it that year. All 3, and yet Vegas has it at 808. And we know the answer, or 800.5, is because there's not a quarterback on that team. Sorry, Drew, this is not an attack on Trey Lance, that is capable of, in my opinion, supporting Deebo, Ayuk, Kittle, McCaffrey, a running game, and a team that knows that their defense is going to keep them in games, and they can probably have a slower paced offense. I want Ayuk to be higher than 800. I think there's a really, really good chance. But Vegas tells me another story by putting it at 800 that if I was betting, I would probably bet the under, because that seems like a trap bet. Like they want you to take the over. It's too enticing. But the 3 games last year with Purdy, with Kittle, with CMC, and with Deebo on the field, Ayuk averaged 49 yards per game. Now, take 49. Let's do the math. Get your calculator out, everybody. Let's do this. 49 times 17. We'll say 16 because he's going to miss a game. Is 784. Do we really expect Ayuk to average 49 yards per game? No, not at all. It's got to be much higher than that. But it's scary. So from the Vegas mouth to my ears, I'm saying I would take the under, because it seems too good to be true, and I worry the Purdy 150 yards per game average that he was. Lance's legs suppress that as well. I would be intrigued to see what Deebo's yardage total would be as well, and I'm guessing it's probably not going to be too much more than that. I'm going to look it up while you guys answer, but I'm taking the under. I'm intrigued to hear if you guys think I'm Ludacris or not the rapper. As commonly overlooked based off of my my recent earlier. So I'm not Ludacris. I do have hoes in different area codes, Carrie. I'm joking. Totally kidding. I do not.
I love it.
Yeah, but I'm taking the
all right. So Nate's taking the under. Drew, over under 800.5 receiving yards for Brandon Ayuk.
Oh man, I don't think that Nate's crazy or ludicrous, either one, however you want to put it. I've been in on Ayuk all off season, and I feel like if I say under, that means that I'm basically saying I'm out. But
I'm right there with you.
I would take the under right now too. There's too many unknowns. There's so many mouths to feed. I think that, and from what I've read, it seems like it's the better bet to just take the under. So I'm gonna take the under.
Rhett?
Agreed. Nate makes a strong case. I mean, there are a lot of guys that need to get that ball. CMC first and foremost. Kittle's going to have those big games. Debo, it's hard to see it happening for Ayuk. He's super talented, though. So you don't want to bet against a guy like that. But, God, Nate makes a great point. I can't see it.
Yeah. Now let's play Call Your Shot. Nate, who's the week 1 starter for the San Francisco 49ers for quarterback?
Purdy.
Drew?
Yeah.
I think it's Purdy too, but he's losing that job, man. Trey Lance is getting some starts.
Brett?
It's probably Brock Purdy, but in my heart, I would love it for it to be Sam Darnold just because.
Man,
Sam Darnold season, baby.
Yeah, for me, this they invested so much into Trey Lance. If he shows any glimmer of hope for them in that backfield, I believe they're going to roll Trey Lance just because of the investment that they have in the players. So if I know it, like Brock Purdy, great story and all, Mr. Irrelevant, but they invested a ton in Trey Lance, and
he went from Mr. Irrelevant to Mr. Overrated so fast. Like life comes at you so fast.
Yeah,
it was. I was looking at his numbers and I was doing this Ayuk thing, and I was like, pretty average 152 yards a game. In 9 targets in week 13 with him, Ayuk had 9 targets in week 13 for 5 catches and 40 yards. His ADOT change, it's just all kinds of things. And Deebo Samuel's over/under yardage is 725. If that doesn't tell you a lot about Vegas's belief in Purdy, nothing does. Or is that Vegas's belief that it's going to be Trey Lance and he's going to put up 95 on the ground every other game and he won't have to throw that much? Drew and I are leaning towards the second, of course, because we want Trey Lance, because I too have a fair share of amount of Trey Lance going on.
Yep. And he's been working with Patrick Mahomes as quarterback coach, something that we brought up on previous shows there. So hopefully he's cleaned up his mechanics a little bit and he can ultimately be the starter for the San Francisco 49ers. But I don't know. It's just such a messy situation. It's a definite battle that you're going to want to keep your ear to the ground to. So let's move to Drew. The player I got for you is Rachaad White, and I gave you this player because I know your infatuation with the guy behind him in Sean Tucker. But Caesar Sportsbook has the rushing yardage total for Rachaad White set at 750.5 rushing yards. Is he going to be higher or lower than that number heading into at the end of the season?
Yeah, so whenever I saw this, I knew exactly what your angle was. And I appreciate the fact that you said that Sean Tucker was the guy behind him. I'm glad that we're all acknowledging that he's better than Keyshawn Vaughn. He's better than Chase Edmonds. Let's just clear the air. Sean Tucker is the running back 2 here. So, I mean, last year, the Bucs, they were last in the NFL in total rushing yards with just over 1,300. However, I do expect Rachaad White to lead this backfield in rushing attempts and rushing yards. And I do think that, no more Tom Brady. They're not going to be chucking the ball as much as they were last year. I do think that the rushing attempts go up. Now, rushing yards, maybe not so much, but assuming he only plays 15 games this year, Rachaad White would just need to average around 50 rushing yards a game to hit that mark. Now, my love for Sean Tucker, I had to temper it a little bit because, I mean, I was hoping that the medical reports were just a myth, but then he ends up going undrafted, and it comes out that there was some legitimate concern from the medical reports, but then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers give him a UDFA contract that's pretty similar to like a 5th-round rookie pick contract. So, and then he gets the clean bill of health. So just whenever I think I'm out, they just pull me back in, and so I'm going to take the over though, because I do think Rachaad White, at least this year, gets a good chance to lead this backfield. But Sean Tucker's coming. he's coming.
He brought his luggage, and it's Louis Vuitton. For me, with Rachaad White, I don't know if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be in a situation where they're going to rely heavily on the run game and being able to close out games with their running back. For me, my outlook for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is that they're always going to be just chasing points every game, therefore airing out the ball a little bit more than we would hope as Rachaad White owners. So that 750 mark is going to be, I think he's going to get real close to it. I'm going to go over with that as well. But if
it's a good line,
it's a great line there. Rhett, for Rachaad White, 750.5 over or under.
Tough call, but I'm gonna say, yeah, it's a really good line. You have to go. I would say over in that situation.
Nate.
Yeah, like Drew mentioned, when you start doing the 54 per game or whatever that number looks like, it seems easy enough, but man, I do think they're going to struggle to even put up. I mean, they were 20 plays per game higher than everybody as far as the passing game goes.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to just turn into relying heavily on this offensive line, which is made up of a rookie coming off of injury, and Tristan Wirfs is fine. So that with Tristan Wirfs exclusively at left tackle, I will say he gets over just because he has at least a decent offensive line, decent middle of the pack.
Yeah, for fantasy, if he gets over 750, if he gets close to that 800, 850, 900 yard mark, he gets about 6 to 8 rushing touchdowns, is involved in the passing game, that puts him in that RB2 spot for you, mid-end RB2 situation as fantasy for when fantasy points come into play. So, I mean, I own a lot of Rachaad White. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have come out and said that they see him being that 3-down back guy as the, pass catcher, first down, second down rusher. The guy's going to be running in between the tackles. He's going to bounce outside. He's going to be the release valve for whoever's playing quarterback there for Tampa Bay, whether it's Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what his situation is going to become maybe week 6, what their usage is, what their scheme is going to be with whatever quarterback is playing back there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, let's get over to Rhett. I gave Rhett Mac Jones, quarterback for the New England Patriots. The line that the Caesars Sportsbook has is 3,250.5 passing yards. Sweet number for Mac Jones. That passing offense would have to take the next step for him to reach that spot. They added Juju Smith-Schuster, a couple decent tight ends there. But Rhett, over or under for Mac Jones, 3,250.5 passing yards.
Before we go any further, I need to correct you and call him by his actual name, which is McCorkle Jones. But anyway, yes, McCorkle Jones, 3,250.5. I'm taking the over, and here's why. Was he under 3,000 yards last year? Yes, but he missed some games, and he threw the ball less than 450 times last year. So if you're looking at today's NFL, 450 pass attempts is, you might as well just consider yourself a 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense. And like you mentioned, they did add some talented pieces. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is an upgrade at the wide receiver position. And I think the gritty of the NFL himself, Mike Gesicki, low-key has some value in the slot playing there as well. So, both of those guys have sneaky value. Something about Mac Jones that we didn't really acknowledge last year. He had 69 deep ball attempts last year in 450 attempts. So they were trying, maybe not successfully, but they were trying to push the ball downfield. And I believe his deep ball completion percentage was somewhere around 40%. So really not bad for what you're doing there. Now, do they have the guys to get down there? We don't know. Devontae Parker can fly, but he's not really invested in football. Mike Gesicki, we'll see what happens on this offense. We know Belichick likes him. But all things considered, I do think this Patriots pass game can surprise. And I think the main beneficiary of that would be Mac Jones, who I think is probably going a little bit lower than he deserves right now in terms of current ADP among quarterbacks. I think he's going to punch above his weight a little bit this year.
Yeah. And the Patriots are always going to have a decent offensive line. They got Bill O'Brien there, bringing in a new offensive scheme for the New England Patriots. So I'm looking forward to see what they're going to be able to do with the passing offense, with the line with Brendan Ayuk and Vegas, kind of pushing you to want to bet the over, with them thinking that he's going to hit under that mark. Same with kind of Rashad White. I think Mac Jones is kind of the opposite. They maybe want bettors to bet the under on that 3,200-yard line, with them looking at that offense and seeing that Mac Jones has a good opportunity to hit the over of that. So I dig the over on that 3,200, 3,250.5 passing yardage mark. They do have Tyquan Thornton there as well, the speedster, second-year wide receiver. They got Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Gesicki, Demario Douglas, the rookie wide receiver that they drafted, has been getting a lot of pop in training camps. They got Kayshon Boutte, one of my favorite LSU wide receivers, but he's kind of taken a fall from grace for me. But
is he still on the roster?
He's still on the roster. Don't play games, Drew.
He ain't dead yet. Okay,
living on a prayer.
But that's my thing for Mac Jones. Now, Rhett, are you drafting Mac Jones or Desmond Ridder?
God, Mac right now, just because I think they're going to throw the ball a little bit more. Because Drew and the Bijan Brigade, I think they're just going to keep rolling with that running game. It's so good. They're going to be so good at that. So you have to take Mac just because,
I'm so glad
he just feels like a more polished quarterback.
Mac Jones or Ryan Tannehill?
Still Mac. Even
Still
with
Mac?
yeah.
Mac Jones or Sam Howell?
Could be Mac. I don't know. I'm in on Mac
He's in.
Jones.
He did. The McCorkle love is strong. Nate, over under 3,250.5 passing yards for McCorkle Jones.
I'm out on Matt. I'd say the under. I think that over is enticing. I think you hit the nail on the head, Chris. It is a line designed for people like me that are skeptics that think no chance, I'm betting the under, and it is designed to take my money, because I don't think he can put up. Here's what, if you ask me, he has a season similar to Daniel Jones in passing last year. Will he finish higher or lower than Daniel Jones? And I would say, well, he's going to finish much lower. Well, if that's the case, then he would have under 3,205 yards, because that's as good of a season as Daniel Jones had. It was still 3,205 yards passing. We know his legs carried it quite a bit, but I worry, I mean, that number it sounds so low, because we're thrown the Patrick Mahomes 5,200 and the Justin Herbert 4,700 and the 4,500s galore from quarterbacks, to think to 32 and you're like 16. It's only 200 yards a game. What schmuck can't throw 200 yards a game? Well, Mac Jones can't throw 200 yards a game. Sorry for the hate, Rhett.
No, that's Let me ask you now, Nate. Mac Jones or Jordan Love?
Oh, that's a good one. Man. Total yardage or fantasy?
Fantasy. Who would you rather?
Jordan Love.
Just because of the offense?
Honestly, I feel like, even if I think LaFleur has a more let's go, even though their pace of play had been really slow, but their pace of play was slow because Aaron Rodgers was slow. I think that's the one thing that's going to be looked at. They're going to say, oh, well, because Rodgers would come up and he was one of the bottom in pace of play. And I don't see the Patriots being high in pace of play either. Yeah, and I think that will go a long way. And for a team that neither one of the offenses scare me necessarily, but I think just metrics wise, I would take Love. I don't want either.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Mac Jones can do outside of that Matt Patricia offensive scheme that they have, especially with Bill O'Brien. We've seen what Bill O'Brien can do. We've seen with his time in Houston, maybe not as a general manager, but as a coach, he's been pretty successful in Alabama. He was legit. Drew, Mac Jones, 3,250.5 yards passing, over or under?
I thought I was in on the over until I listened to Nate, and he's really, man, he's really
tricky.
Made me think a little bit harder about it. I don't know. I think I think going from having a piss poor defensive coordinator for your offensive coordinator
That's
to having
true.
an
Thank
actual
you.
offensive coordinator, I think that's enough for me to want to take the over. But I
Yeah.
will say this: you asked Ryan Tannehill or Mac Jones, especially with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins now, I'm
Mhm.
comfortably taking Ryan Tannehill. Pretty much every other name you mentioned, I think I would take Mac Jones. Maybe not Jordan Love, but Ryan. This is not an AFC South show, but I think Ryan Tannehill. I think he gets disrespected a little bit. And from a fantasy standpoint, he's not a quarterback one, but I think that he's a very, especially with the Hopkins addition, I think he's a very good quarterback too. So just quick plug on Ryan Tannehill there too.
I love it. So an over and 2 unders. That's it for us, Nate. We appreciate your time coming on the show, talking AFC West musts, busts, and maybes. The frame is yours. Let the people know what you got going on inside fantasy football, outside of fantasy football. Let them have it.
Yeah. Obviously, if you're not following me yet and you want to, at Nate Markham on Twitter, we follow all of our work at Fantasy and Frames. Of course, I am only just one part of a 20 plus part system. So if you follow just one thing, follow Fantasy and Frames, and then subsequently you can follow me if you want, mediocre takes and, sushi talk. But we have a Shoot the Gap podcast where Jorge, myself, and Hollywood Titan discuss the defensive side of the ball. That's typically on Thursdays or Fridays. We like to keep you guessing. We don't necessarily tell you when. It's just, but make sure you go over to that page on YouTube. And if you hit that bell, you don't have to guess because it will tell you when we go on. It'll tell us when we go on, honestly. But this week, we bring in Gary Davenport, the godfather of IDP, to talk about defensive backs, as well as the Kings Classic Dick Butkus edition, when we have, I would say, a pretty good opportunity. So the Kings Classic, if you're not familiar, for people listening, is the overall like analyst league where the top industry folks get together and draft at the Hall of Fame, the NFL Hall of Fame. And we've been fortunate enough to be invited in. And myself and Jorge and Tyler Heil drafted last year. Jorge with the knee injury this year on the IR, or the DL, or the DIL, or whatever you want to call it nowadays, is out. And so I'm going to be taking his spot and doing the IDP. Listen to this, you guys. It's 14 teams, 34 rounds, I believe. I think it's 470. I don't know 470 defensive people. I'm going to have to get a cheat sheet going, and maybe we'll talk about that. That'll be this Friday night at 10 Eastern, Shoot the Gap, where you will have us three, and then, of course, Gator J behind the scenes making us all look and sound so pretty.
Yes, sir. Special shout out to Gator J on the 1s and 2s. That's it for us, boys. Tune in next week. Make sure you tune in next week as we bring you another divisional preview. As always, as Nate mentioned, check out Shoot the Gap with him, Jorge, and Hollywood Titan. The Dynasty 365 show with Stacey Perez, Tyler Heil, and Chris Burns, the Dynasty Deviant, as well as Mocking After Dark with Gator J and Kyle Ziegler. They're always running different kinds of mocks for you. And they want to hear from you as well. If you have a mock that you want to see go on Mocking After Dark, make sure you hit up Gator J at Gator J on Twitter, and he will accommodate that mock so you can see where you should be, how you should be approaching those drafts coming up. For Drew at Drew3MR on Twitter, for Rhett Manuel at R Manuel Sports on Twitter, I am Chris Battistel. Doodles.